Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is Vendorflow, better communication for trucking teams with my friend Eric Rodriguez. How's it going, Eric?
Good to see you, Joe. Doing well.
Finally. I was supposed to interview you years ago and just getting pushed off. So finally, I'm talking to you.
Well, not pushed off. We were just waiting for the right time, and here we are. It's the right time.
Exactly. Eric, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, hey, I'm Eric Rodriguez, CEO and co-founder of Vendorflow, calling out of Los Angeles.
So what does Vendorflow do?
Well, a lot, but in unified communications for trucking fleets is our focus that we'll be talking about today. So looking forward to get into it.
So you say unified. What is that? What are you getting at there?
Well, sure. If we put on our Gartner hat for a second here, UCaaS is a category, Unified Communications as a Service, and that would be RingCentral would be sort of the emblematic UCaaS provider, Dialpad, Google Voice, 8x8, and a whole bunch more. And we are that for the trucking industry. And what's being unified? Well, voice, texting, WhatsApp, ELD messaging, TMS app messaging, and more that actually is pertinent to this industry.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. So who do you typically sell to?
Trucking fleets mostly. So broadly, we sell to trucking fleets, freight brokers, and ports. The Port of Virginia is one of our customers. But our focus is very much trucking fleets. 25 trucks and up tends to be the zone for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're all walking around with mobile phones now. And so when somebody says, oh, unified communication, I know we need to be a little more professional than just mobile phones once we have a fleet of trucks.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who say, I just have 2 trucks. We're going to use mobile phones. That's maybe fine for a minute.
Sure. I agree. I think so too. Yeah.
But as you get bigger and bigger, and as you try to be compliant and you try and have, shared communications between your fleet and your dispatchers and customer service, it gets a lot harder to say, yeah, we just all have John's mobile phone and we text him and we call him whenever we want, forgetting the fact that he's hauling 80,000 pounds down the expressway.
Sure. Yeah, pretty easy when there's 1 or 2 dispatchers, no big deal. Not a big teamwork problem when there's only 2 guys. But when you get around that 4 or 5 dispatchers, that's when it seems to be a whole nother world.
Yeah. So your main customers are trucking companies, trucking fleets, and you said also the ports. We'll get to that in a minute. What problem are you solving for them?
It's mostly around organizing this mix of different communications channels that many fleets use. It tends to vary wildly, fleet to fleet. Some are using personal phones, some are using VoIP solutions, some are using social stuff like WhatsApp. So we get a handle on how they're approaching it, what the issues may be, but usually it pertains to bringing it into one place so the whole team is organized in how they're communicating with their drivers.
And I know we'll get into some more detail about this, but the bigger you get in this business, the more compliance matters. And I had a conversation with you yesterday, and we were just talking about the whole idea of compliance within this space and how a lot of the tools that we're using, because they're so damn convenient, are potentially going to get us in trouble.
Oh, sure. Having communications offline, that could be trouble. Got to have that all brought into a professional corporate umbrella. Very important for these communications.
We'll get into some more detail in a minute. First, tell us a little bit about you, Eric. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started Vendorflow, and why did you start Vendorflow?
Sure. So going way back, I'm from San Diego, Chula Vista, not far from the Mexican border, where I'm from. Went to the school in the San Francisco Bay Area, UC Berkeley. Did business economics up there. But the fun fact about my career is I started technically I started at a grocery store and then as a security guard. But those are more like summer jobs. Let's keep it real. But in my early 20s, I worked at a very high-end restaurant, a Michelin star restaurant up in San Francisco. And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot being in that type of environment because they mean it when they mean high standards. And there's a lot to learn. Learning how to treat people with service, there's a lot to pick up. I recommend it to anyone to work at a restaurant for a little while.
Oh yeah, I did a lot of food service when I was a kid, and not at a Michelin star by any stretch. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Learning that customer service, and I think it's even more important today where a lot of young people and old people too, who am I kidding, have their phones stuck in, are their face stuck in a phone all day. And I think you become less, less empathetic, less, you don't notice the little things that you're supposed to.
Of course. Oh yeah, much to learn from these types of environments. Oh yeah.
So I interrupted you. Continue on with your career path.
Yeah, so we'll move past the restaurant part. I know a few recipes, maybe, but I was more front of house, not kitchen. Let's be honest. So after that, by virtue of being in San Francisco, to be honest, it was relatively easy to bounce over to a tech career. So I went on www.craigslist.com and looked for jobs, and there was some venture-backed tech startups that were hiring, and I just kind of came in as a spreadsheet guy, for lack of a better word, to do general analysis. But that's how I got in, and I got into more of a product management career over time, product management that is, and learned a little bit about coding, just a bit. I could make a simple website. I wouldn't say I could make a full application, no. But through that, I eventually came down to Los Angeles about 10 years ago. Been working at venture-backed tech companies ever since. But my introduction to trucking and freight brokerage was in 2018. I joined Next Trucking, which was of the generation of the sort of digital freight broker type companies. I was charged with helping to build their TMS, as well as they had a mobile trucker app. And that is kind of where we get into the Vendorflow story, if you want me to dive in right now. Yeah. So, there's this mobile trucker app, and we found that it was pretty difficult to get truck drivers to install it, to use it reliably, to log into it. A whole lot of friction there for booking shipments, sharing location, sharing proof of delivery, all these things.
Be clear, you're asking them to download an app onto their phone?
Yeah, asking truck drivers to download an app. And the app sounds like a great idea because, just hey, you run your whole business right here. All the loads are here, blah, blah, blah. No problem so far. But, when there's 25 other companies that are also saying download our app, that's when it gets a little
app
tough.
Fatigue.
Very much an app fatigue story was the genesis of all of this. And then, it begs the question, if 25% of the time the trucker is playing ball and they are using the app, what are they doing 75-80% of the time? Well, they are doing SMS and WhatsApp and WeChat and Facebook Messenger and all these other channels that are convenient and natural and familiar to them. That's what we observed. And in our broader research, we further validated this across the broader industry. Most fleets and brokers are just equipped with generic kind of offline, what I call shrug communications solutions. Maybe it's Google Voice, maybe it's using their personal phones to text with the drivers, maybe it's WhatsApp, but it's not tied to their logistics systems, their ELD, their TMS. So that's the opportunity we saw, and we've been driving down that for several years now.
Yep. And that kind of brings up a topic that I haven't talked about lately, but it's come up on my podcast over time, which is somebody used the term on my podcast, commercial grade interfaces that we all kind of got used to. So once you've used messaging, whether it's WhatsApp or if you're using Facebook Messenger or whatever you're using, and there's an ease to it. So when I go and I'm traveling, I use Lyft, and I look and say, it's just so damn easy. And then you probably lived through this, when then you'd go to work and there'd be clunky apps and the applications just weren't as elegant. They weren't minimal. They weren't a good feel. And so we all just kind of lean towards using the stuff that is just so intuitive that we have on our phones right now. So the challenge becomes, how do I get them off of that? And you said to me yesterday, we were talking about this, is people are going to default to what's easy.
Oh, yeah, very much. And yeah, indeed, the answer is don't get them off of it. If that's what they prefer, no problem. But as a business, you can reach them over WhatsApp. You can reach them over SMS, and you can implement productivity standards or safety standards or compliance standards to better govern those WhatsApp communications, as opposed to it being a off in the wild, offline type of situation. Oh, yeah.
Right. So there's a few points I wanted to talk to you about. So I think my first one is, and again, this gets back to a little bit of our conversation that was offline. What's wrong today with the communication between trucking teams and the dispatch and customers and everyone else?
Well, I'll back up a little if we're getting into the problem space a little bit. I'll be at one of these ELD user conferences. It doesn't really, it's incidental which one. I suspect they're all quite similar. But I talked to about 25 different trucking fleets and I asked them, how do you do your driver communications? Get about 25 different answers. And I think that tells you something, right? Where some will say, oh, well, we have our drivers install Microsoft Teams, and that's how we do the messaging. Others will say GChat. Others will say WhatsApp. Others will say SMS. SMS from dispatcher uses a mobile phone. Others using Google Voice in the VoIP class. Others, forgive me for keep going here, but it does keep going. ELD messaging. There's TMS messaging. What about I don't know, like 10 Street style app messaging? There's all range. And inside the fleet, you say, oh, okay, so your fleet does this thing. Well, actually, the safety guy does this, and the HR lady does that, and dispatcher does this other thing. So it is, and I mean this with love, it is a mess. And we think there's a lot that can be organized here.
Well, also, the trucking business is filled with immigrants. And a lot of times they're going to bring, they're using a system that they maybe brought from wherever they used to live. And they're comfortable with it. And yeah, there's no consistency. And again, I know one thing I've learned over the last 7 years is trucking gets more and more and more of a compliant industry where you must do it this way because somebody got sued for doing it slightly off. And also, when I'm driving down the street or in my car, my phone, if it pings and I think, oh, there's a text message that I absolutely know I should not be listening to or reading, and my mind connects so I can hear it on my dash, but I still know that's somewhat distracted. And if it was something that was detail oriented, I'm going to be tempted to try and write it down. And I love to say, yeah, I always pull over for those messages, but when we're talking about the drivers, they are driving and being safe is their career. So we put them and other drivers and everybody else at enormous risk when we're communicating with them.
Absolutely. There's a funky culture around this topic, somewhat of a don't ask, don't tell of sorts, where a lot of fleet leaders don't want to acknowledge the reality that there's a great deal of texting that goes on. And rather than kind of ignoring it or kind of wishing it didn't happen or something, we're an advocate of acknowledging it and putting in place some good regulations and a governor, if you will, to mitigate that risk and be proactive as opposed to kind of reactive and wishful, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. And I just getting one back to one thing I said about immigrants. Years ago, when I was still in the day-to-day trucking business, there was an expediting company that we loved using. And I forgot where they might have been, maybe Middle Eastern, good guys. I never met them in person. Of course, it's the nature of our business. But I remember talking to one of the guys on the phone, and he said, hey, Joe, English is my second language. I would rather just text me the stuff. And I was like, okay. So this is 10, 15 years ago. I was texting him, and I didn't think at the time, this is unsafe that I'm texting him. And he was just doing it because he said, I'm better at the written language than at the verbal. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. I'm just trying to be sensitive to what he wants, but I'm also texting someone who's driving.
Well, and I mean, it always depends on the case, but we train and we hope that they'll first stop and be in park and all these good things before engaging with it. But oh yeah, it's a classic tension and challenge. Yeah.
Yep. So what else is wrong with trucking besides everyone using trucking communications besides everyone using slightly different systems?
Right. I appreciate that. So yes. So point one, as I mentioned, was the mess of there's too many channels that need to be organized and thus unified in one shared inbox. Well, the other is this, I hinted with the shared inbox concept. So we'll talk to fleets and they'll have issues where let's say that at this fleet, there's 6 dispatchers and each dispatcher has their own mobile phone with their own number. Well, okay, so from the driver perspective, you need to know, oh, well, Bob's on duty right now, so Bob the dispatcher, so I'll text him. Oh, well, Bob's about to finish his shift, so I'll start texting Richard the dispatcher. It becomes a mess real quick, especially at the shift change. So that's why it's a funny thing. So that's why one of our customers, when we learned about how they do their communications, they had a mobile phone for each dispatcher. And then they slimmed it down to one mobile phone that all the dispatchers had to share. Well, you would think that sounds like it's going backwards. You would think more phones are better. Not when it makes things complicated, it's not. One phone was basically their kind of caveman shared inbox, if you will. It's shared in one inbox, and they physically pass the inbox around. Of course, with Vendorflow, is not a physical inbox. It's just a web browser experience where all dispatchers can log in and see all the communications. And yeah, you're a night dispatcher. You show up, cool. You have all the context of everything that's been going on all day. You don't need to have a bunch of Post-its left behind from the last shift.
Right. Well, yeah, and also when I go home and I take my phone and I gave the driver this instructions, maybe there's a change. I gave him that instruction, and then the next person comes in, they don't know the instructions I give them, and then maybe they're giving him slightly different ones without any context of that. So, how does Vendorflow fix this?
Yeah, well, we provide that shared inbox model that can pull in voice and texting and ELD messaging and WhatsApp and other channels. We consult with the customer. We say, which channels are relevant to you? Which ones do you care about? We pull them into their implementation. So in one place, the dispatch team can work from there. If they're multi-terminal, we might be setting up a different phone line for each terminal. Not a big deal. Just a matter of we consult with them for the best practice we've seen in the field on this topic.
So as far as the driver goes, does he have to download Vendorflow onto a phone?
Very important question. And the answer is a big no. That would be antithetical to our whole idea here. The driver shouldn't even know that we exist. That's our philosophy. If they don't know we exist, well, yeah, they don't have to install anything, don't have to log in anything, don't have to be trained on anything. That's how it should be. We reach the driver where they are by whatever channel the driver prefers, WhatsApp, SMS,
So
yada, yada.
there is no, hey, guys, no longer use the tool you're comfortable with and use this new one.
Right. Oh, for sure. That's a classic. Yeah. That would be a hell of a punchline if after all this, me saying there's too many apps, I say the solution is our app. No. There's enough.
I've heard that before.
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure. No, there's quite enough. So really, the experience is just for operations, and it's not just dispatchers who use Vendorflow. Safety leaders use Vendorflow to broadcast out alerts to their drivers to say, "Hey, there's rough conditions in this area," or "Hey, there's training on Tuesday." HR folks use it. Recruiting folks use it as well. But mostly it's dispatch is definitely going to represent the most of our users.
Right. So how does this? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you to be very detailed about this. How is this safer for fleets and teams?
Sure. So when we talk about the safety issue, well, let's first enumerate there's three safety related topics that we've picked up from talking with our customers. One is the obvious one, the texting and driving, distracted driving risk. Another is waking drivers while they're resting or sleeping. And finally, there's a sub bullet to understand when texting and driving may be happening more from a reporting perspective. So let's go back to the first one. We're going to get into ELD integration here being an opportunity. But yeah, when texting a driver today, if you're using Google Voice or these generic products, you're just hoping and wishing that you're texting them and they won't check their phone while they're driving. You're hoping and wishing. That's the plan. If you have an ELD governor, well, you can set rules that say, if the truck is rolling while I'm trying to send this message, to hold on to it, queue it up, deliver it when it's safe. Well, when it's safe, you might ask? Well, to be honest, we need to work with more safety leaders to say, is it when the truck is stopped, for how long, in park, engine off? As far as I can tell, it seems to be up for debate. But we'll work with the safety leader on whatever standard they feel, because the ELD will provide us that context regardless. This mitigates risk by not needlessly texting drivers while they're rolling. And we could even have a fast lane and a slow lane. For urgent, it could go straight through. For non-urgent, it could just reach them when they're parked. And at least it can greatly reduce the amount of distractions they're receiving while they're moving.
Right. And obviously still want drivers to pull over when they get something, a message, and they're figuring to read it. But if there's one that's non-urgent and it's a certain sound, I'm assuming, and they go, I don't have to stop. That's not an urgent. If there's an urgent one, you go, okay, now I got to pull over and maybe even make a phone call. That's what we want.
Yeah, and the similar rules apply for the. I hear that the one amateur dispatcher will text a driver when they're in sleep mode or rest mode, and sometimes if the driver has the notifications on, I can wake them up. And well, if you're waking up a driver when they should be sleeping, you're getting into dicey territory, aren't you, from a safety perspective? Or you're giving them reasons to say, hey, I didn't get a proper sleep last night. Y'all were texting me all night. So we can set up warnings to dispatch to say, hey, based on the ELD, it looks like I don't know if they're literally sleeping, right? But it looks like they're in rest mode. It looks like they're in sleep mode. Are you sure you want to send this? Or can we just queue it up and deliver it when they're back on duty? These are ways, again, there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but there are ways to mitigate the risk from a safety perspective.
Yeah, I was not to make it all about me, but years ago I was crossing a street. I worked at a little logistics company. I was crossing the street and a car, or like a truck, actually ran a red light and hit me. And so I had to go. There was a lawsuit, and I had to go in a deposition. And I remember I didn't do anything wrong. I was walking across the street, and I got hit by a truck. And I remember one of the first questions the guy asked, were you texting? I was thinking, why would it matter? The light was green. I was crossing. And I said, no, I was not. And it's a big street. And I remember thinking, that is probably the very first question that investigators and lawyers are looking at if there's an accident. Again, we're trying to prevent all that. But I got to think that's the first thing they're looking for. Was this driver distracted by his telematics or by his phone or anything? We're trying to avoid that.
I agree. And yeah, that does seem to be the case where that's one of the first elements of the playbook. And yeah, they can. I'm not a lawyer, subpoena, I think, that information and do discovery on that information, of course. And first, as a fleet, you're going to want to make sure you have records of yourself to defend yourself. That's one. And two, you're going to want to have in place measures to demonstrate that, hey, it wasn't us who texted them, and we have all these measures in place, training measures, reminder measures, risk mitigation measures in place to reduce their risk.
And just to be clear, it's usually not the driver's fault. It's in these accidents that so often happens with passenger vehicles. So the problem that you say is that fleets are using multiple channels for driver communications, and that has its own challenges. And then, so there's no shared inbox, which is a problem. And then when they do start there's other challenges for the drivers who you're waking them up when they're trying to sleep, and God knows how hard it is to sleep in a truck. I can't imagine if I had to sleep in a truck. I hardly sleep well at a hotel, right? But also, you don't want them distracted, clearly. And then I want to just make sure we're putting our drivers and our fleet and our dispatchers in the best position to be safe and compliant.
Safety first, as they say. And these aren't just our own harebrained ideas. I mean, this has been coming from our actual fleet customers and their safety leaders. It's an interesting new zone, though. Most of these folks had not really thought about this intersection sure, people have thought about distracted driving, of course, but most folks haven't thought about the intersection between SMS and ELD and how that can pertain to safety. So that's been really fun.
Yeah. So how does this connect with the ELD? So it's funny when you said to me when we were talking yesterday about this is, we have communication problems. And I was like, oh my God, with all of the telematics, ELDs, all of the stuff we have, how do we have communication problems? The problem we have is so much of it is outside of the formal communications. And again, we're still struggling. We put these ELDs in, but so often it's not the software. It's the business rules around the software. It's not the hardware. It's the business rules around the hardware. So please talk about how you guys fit into the ELD.
Yeah, and just to give you a taste for folks wondering, how big of a deal is communications and messaging and so on and so forth. One of our customers we onboarded a few months ago, 300 trucks, they do 150,000 text messages per month. I'm not a math genius, but that seems like a lot. They're talking about something. It's not just they send a couple messages a day and that's it. they're talking about something for sure. And incidentally, we know that a lot of it's about sharing images and pictures of, hey, this trailer light's broken or this pallet looks messed up or all the weird stuff that happens. Because, I used to be a TMS developer, and in my TMS brain, I always think about, it's just pick up and drop off and POD. No, there's so much other stuff that, it just falls outside the classic little path in one's mind. But that's a little off track. The ELD topic. So funny thing, if you asked me a year and a half ago or a year ago even, hey, how does ELD pertain to communications? I might have not even known the answer. This came about, again, from discovery with our customers. And we just announced a couple of weeks ago that we now are live in the Samsara app marketplace. So we're super excited about that. But what's the story here? What's the opportunity? Yeah.
And Samsara is an ELD.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of these folks will characterize themselves as, because an ELD is literally that device, but ELD and fleet management, if something like that. That's kind of how I think about it. But there's Samsara, there's Motive, there's Geotab. Yeah, those guys.
Yeah. There's a lot of different ELDs, and they're all that's mandatory that they have them. I think I now call it just the tech stack for drivers, because if 10 years ago, if somebody says, hey, I have this proof of delivery thing, you go, oh my God, I need a proof of delivery. That's exactly what I need. And then I also have another app that is going to track miles and this. And so we ended up with all these different applications. And to call it an ELD is, it's too small. And I think it's just like asking when you look at your mobile phone and say, yeah, that's a device that I talk on. It's like, that's just the beginning of it. There's a million things you do on your phone now, including shopping and tracking your kids and a million other things, buying stuff. So I think I'm just going to call it, until somebody comes up with a better title for it, telematics or tech stack for drivers.
Sure, I'll work with it. I like it. And I mean, to extend on your tech stack topic more, if we think about the tech stack for a fleet, well, what do you need? Well, you need a TMS, you need an ELD, and we argue, why is your voice and communications just generic black box? Why wouldn't you use something that's built for the industry, that integrates with ELD, that integrates with TMS, that has, language translation, so when the guy from the Middle East doesn't speak your language and so on, is translated. There's so much that we can do for this industry as opposed to the generics. But pardon the pitch. Well, back to regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, and the tech stack for drivers ideally has them doing zero or very minimal inputs. So we think of tech stack on my computer. I have a tech stack. I'm here. I'm sitting at it. I don't ever want the driver have to sit there on his phone or on a system and type stuff in. That is not what they're being paid to do.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
So talk about the compliance and the productivity on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, if I may get back to the broader, I dodged your question that I wanted to answer, the ELD topic more broadly. How do we connect with them? And yes, I'll touch on how it intersects with compliance, how it intersects with productivity. There's a number of ideas that have come up from our customers that we've been rolling out. We already talked about the safety ones, right? The don't send them a text if they're rolling. Okay, that we're good there. Check, move on. But as a dispatcher, you're talking to your driver in your communications interface. Well, wouldn't it be better if you had from the ELD the driver's hours of service, the driver's current location, the driver's on-duty off-duty status?
Get
just
some
a little
context.
Not rocket science, just a little context. Now contrast that against Google Voice or Ring Central, all these other things. They don't have that. And it's funny, the simple things are what make people happy sometimes. And that's been big for the dispatchers.
Yeah. So if I'm communicating and I want to communicate with my driver and say, hey, I'm going to call the customer and say you're going to be an hour late. And then I look and I notice, oh, you're running out of hours and 15 minutes. No, you're going to be a few hours late, or whatever the proper message is. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I have all that information. And is that side by side with Vendorflow inside the same application?
It's inside the Vendorflow interface. So you're talking to a driver, you pull up their ELD panel, and we can grab that data right inside of it. And our customers tell us that it reduces, for lack of a better word, stupid questions. In other words, the dispatcher is going to ask, where are you? Oh, you're right there. Okay, never mind. Don't need to ask, right? So that also reduces needless noise and distractions and all these fun things as well.
I love it. I love it. So so getting back to the compliance piece, how do we how does this help with improving the compliance for fleets?
Yeah, so a classic. It's very funny. I don't know how I should take it, but I did a whole 45-minute presentation on site at maybe 100 truck fleet thereabouts, and they're like, "Love it, love it, love it," but can it do this? And what they wanted is they have a problem where their drivers are missing breaks, and that's a compliance issue if they're not taking their break on time. So they want to set a rule that sends an auto reminder over other channels, perhaps SMS or whatever the driver will observe and respond to safely, to get them to take their break more. And implemented that. Got much better results on drivers taking their breaks. But it's funny. Again, it's the simple things. That's not inherently rocket science, is it? But we are a rare voice and communications vendor that actually bothered to do the ELD integration. The vast majority of the generics won't and don't.
Yep. Well, and again, all of the other communications can flow through yours, and you can add the guardrails, so to speak, to make sure you're not hitting him up when he's sleeping, not when he's driving, and also everything's in a shared inbox at that point, as opposed to saying, "Oh, Sue went home and she had her phone with her when she left."
Right. There's less of this sort of, I don't know, who's on first type of confusion. Oh, yeah. And having that full audit trail is so important because when things are escalated to leadership, imagine being a leader and you get CC'd on a terrible email with 15 responses or whatever the case may be. Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to want it to have in one nice, clear shared inbox. You pop in, you see what's going on. We have this thing called mentions. So as a dispatcher, if something safety related happens in my conversation with the driver, I can go at safety person, and safety person can go, "Zoop, come take a look," to that. So that's a nice way to escalate things to management as well. But a bunch of notes there. Yeah.
I like it. So what's we talked before we hit the record button about some future opportunities with what you guys are doing in this space. Talk about some of those opportunities.
Yeah, so we're really excited about what we're going to be doing in 2025. We'll be going deeper into ELD integration in a couple ways. One, in that, well, we got Samsara, but we're looking at Geotab, Motive, Platform Science, and others as well this year. That's kind of a horizontal. And there's going deeper into some of the safety compliance stories that we talked about as well. Beyond that, we do want to reconcile ourselves against this new wave of sort of AI technology. We're kind of feeling out where the opportunities are. We mostly sell to fleets, but we do sell to some brokers, and freight brokers have taken some interest. But more than likely, we'll be integrating with the various kind of voice AI providers that are out there. So giving examples, so I'm not too abstract. Okay, so we Vendorflow, we set up the phone line for dispatch to communicate. Okay, good. Well, let's say that they fell in love with a voice AI product that has some kind of robocall workflow that fires a call that says, where are you, or upload your POD or whatever it is. They can tap into our line that we've established, fire that robocall that's powered by them, not us. And we could still have that all in one place. Or let's say driver calls in and they press 2 and it's powered by some kind of AI voice chatbot to negotiate the rates or ask about which loads are available. Well, we can print the transcript in the conversation record. So then the dispatch and operations folks who use our interface can see what's going on, what they talk about. So that can integrate it a little better as well. And we're looking at a little bit of AI related work ourselves, but we are not an AI first company. Let's keep it real. We are a communications first company. That's our role. So there's some simple stuff like, we've gotten requests for, hey, if a driver says, "Yeah, man, I just showed up," to employ NLP, natural language processing, to say, okay, that's an affirmative. We could maybe turn around and update the TMS that they arrive. The simple stuff I like. The endless complicated stuff like negotiating prices, you can have at AI companies. We got our zone, and that's more straightforward communications, shall we say?
Well, I think the nature of all the technology we're using is we see certain things that it starts small, and everyone's like, "Hey, we're open to AI." I think where we're at right now as an industry is, for the most part, in an AI readiness mode, which is we're trying to see how it might work with us. But let's face it, the communications we have are important. So I don't want an important message interpreted by AI in the wrong way and communicated. And that's again, we're trying to be more compliant, not less compliant. But I do think there's opportunities. I've started to see some of this where, um, again, language translation. So that might be a great opportunity if somebody's speaking their native tongue and you're able to translate it quickly. And again, who knows? Maybe you have dispatchers. By the way, as soon as you get down to uh, the Mexican border, we have lots of people who speak Spanish. And speaking, I remember saying this. I was in Laredo just before uh, COVID, and I remember the meeting began in Spanish, and I was like, "Oh, whoa!" I was thinking, and I was like, "Hey guys, I don't speak Spanish." And then we drove over to Nuevo Laredo, and the meeting began in English. And I was like, "All right." So that's the reality, but we don't want anybody to be left out, and I don't want anybody. If you can quickly change that and make it accessible for everybody, that's a beautiful thing. Because again, we depend on immigrants. People who speak a second language in this business.
Oh, very much, and that's why we support language translation. It's not wasn't just our idea. There's a Houston-based dispatch team where 4 out of 5 spoke Spanish, but one of them didn't, and they said, "Could you help us out? Help me out here." So they can translate pretty easily. Yeah.
I have some people who have Spanish names that I work with, and they they don't speak Spanish, but they say people always assume I do. So you're Eric Rodriguez. Do people just assume you speak Spanish?
Oh, for sure. I struggle. I can get around. When I travel to Mexico City with my friends, usually I'm the designated Spanish speaker. Putting that generously. I'm not gonna demonstrate it here. That's for sure. It's high school level.
I joke about this, but when I was young, many moons ago, they taught us French. I was like, why did we learn French at school rather than learning Spanish?
Sure. Well, you're close to Canada.
Nothing wrong with, but the French we were learning when you go to Montreal, they don't speak that French, and they know they know you're an American right away if you don't speak it. Me and my friends learned that.
Yeah, I love it.
Anyway, so let's wrap this bad boy up. I'm going to do the best I can to summarize this. I'm talking to my friend Eric Rodriguez. We're talking about Vendorflow, his company, and it's better communication for trucking teams. And first we talked about what's wrong with trucking communications. And the problem is there's just multiple channels, and we like those channels. So no one wants to give up those channels. And we don't have a shared inbox because I'm using Facebook Messenger, somebody else is using WhatsApp, somebody's using Telegram. Everybody's using every system under the sun, and it's a problem. And it results in miscommunication. It results in probably a lot of your documentation being spread across many systems. Secondly, we talked about just safety. Safety is a problem, and we want this communications, but we want it to be done properly. So we can't have the driver being distracted or hassled. Let's face it, drivers, their livelihood is driving safely, so they don't want to be distracted. We don't want to wake them up. God knows it's tough enough to sleep on the road. We don't want to wake them up when they're resting, and we also want to be able to track that and prove to somebody that we are being compliant. We are not doing the wrong things. And when you're using multiple systems, there's no way to easily say, here's how compliant we are being with not bugging our drivers while they drive. And we talked about all the opportunities, and the solution is using a system like Vendorflow, where you can use all your current apps, but get it all into a compliant format. And then not only just compliant, but also have some context, like where the driver actually is, and when their rest is coming, how many hours, all of the stuff that you need to know when you're talking to them. Next, we talked about the future, how these integrations, I guess I'll call them, we need more and more integration, but we also need the guardrails that prevent us from doing the wrong stuff. Anyway, put a big old bow around this one, Eric Rodriguez. Final thoughts on the topic.
No, I appreciate it. Well, been a lot of fun talking to you today, Joe. Appreciate it. But yeah, I would say driver communications, it varies wildly across fleets. And we love nothing more than hearing stories from fleets of how they do it, how it's gone, their journey. Usually it's a journey of they tried this, then they moved to that, and they moved to this other model, and they're still working it out. we would love to be a guide in this world to offer people best practices. And if it turns out that we're the best solution, love it. Let's do it. Voice texting and beyond. There's so much we can do together. So appreciate it.
So if somebody's listening, they said, yes, we absolutely need this. What does that implementation look like when they're working with Vendorflow?
Really, we're talking a couple of weeks, pretty straightforward. A lot of folks will say, oh, well, we have a big IT roadmap and they might think that we're like a TMS, like some big thing. Nope. This is pretty straightforward stuff. This is a quick win. A couple of weeks. Training is 30 minutes. We got to onboard their phone line or maybe port their existing phone line if they want to keep what they got. But otherwise, pretty straightforward stuff here. And it's communications. The operations team, they pick it up like it's nothing. It's pretty straightforward stuff.
You're working with Port of Virginia. I saw that on your website. What are they using it for?
Yeah, they've been an amazing partner. They've been using us for a little over a year now, and they use it for broadcasting operations alerts to their motor carrier community. Safety alerts. Hey, this terminal, this gate is going to be closed early today, or hey, inclement weather, or hey, this stack is going to be offline for a bit, come back later, or whatever the story may be. They send out a few a day to their motor carrier community. We've observed about half of the ports in the country do this. We encourage more pick it up.
Well, I love that. I'm in the Detroit metro area, and we've had some really cold weather lately, and a little bit of snow, but not too much. But when it gets that cold, there's issues, and we have we have a lot of traffic between us and Windsor, and it'd be really great if you started getting communications from, hey, what are the bridge conditions? Is there a long line? Should I be going one route over another one? Should I take a break and wait till it cleans up?
Oh yeah, lots of opportunities to engage people about what they're interested in. Of course, I'd love to do that too. Sure.
I love it. So, what conference will we see you and the fine folks from Vendorflow at?
In the short term, Manifest Las Vegas for sure.
I'll see you there.
Shortly after that.
Although we got to plan it. If you're going to Manifest, you have to plan to getting together. They're so big now. It's 6,000 people. You're like, yeah, that's what I've learned this the last few years. You got to plan the meeting with your friends.
I like it. Well, I'll shoot you a text. We'll make something happen there. And beyond that, Geotab Connect. So I'll be at all of I'll be Samsara Beyond, Motives version, their user conference. So the ELD stuff, if you haven't picked that up, I'll be at all those types of events this year for sure.
Yep. And Eric, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any of the links you and your marketing team give me. I'll put those in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time. By the way, this is so long overdue. We talked about doing this 2-3 years ago, and and I see you at a conference, we say, let's do it. And then, so finally, but I love what you guys are doing. And it seems like from an outsider's perspective, that's not a problem. We have more communications than ever before. Yes, we do. And that is a little bit of a problem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. I appreciate the button on it there. So thanks so much, Joe. A lot of fun.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.